the great city of Denmark, Copenhagen. From Copenhagen's origin as a hamlet which hardly anyone had ever heard of to a position as the dazzling capital of the Danish Empire, and to its current position as one of the world's most talked about as well as sung of cities is a colorful history. Copenhagen is Scandinavia's largest city and its history goes way back. The reigning monarch Queen Margrethe II can trace her ancestry back to the Viking Age, and that makes Denmark the world's oldest kingdom. Among cobbled squares, narrow streets and old buildings, the history lives with us to this day. Copenhagen was founded in 1167 by tough as nails Bishop Absalon, who erected a fortress on Slotsholmen Island, fortifying a small and previously unprotected harborside village. After the fortification was built, the village grew in importance and took on the name København, Merchant's Port, which was later condensed to Copenhagen. Absalon's fortress stood until 1369, when it was destroyed in an attack on the town by the powerful Hanseatic states. In 1376 construction began on a new Slotsholmen fortification, Copenhagen Castle, and in 1416 King Erik of Pomerania took up residence at the site, marking the beginning of Copenhagen's role as the capital of Denmark. Still, it wasn't until the reign of Christian IV, in the first half of the 17th century, that the city was endowed with much of its splendor. A lofty Renaissance designer, Christian IV began an ambitious construction scheme, building 2 new castles and many other grand edifices, including the Rundetårn Observatory and the glorious Borsen, Europe's first stock exchange. In 1711 the bubonic plague reduced Copenhagen's population of 60,000 by 1/3. Tragic fires, one in 1728 and the other in 1795, wiped out large tracts of the city, including most of its timber buildings. However, the worst scourge in the city's history is generally regarded as the unprovoked British bombardment of Copenhagen in 1807, during the Napoleonic Wars. The attack targeted the heart of the city, inflicting numerous civilian casualties and setting hundreds of homes, churches and public buildings on fire. Copenhagen flourished once again in the 19th and 20th centuries, expanding beyond its old city walls and establishing a reputation as a center for culture, liberal politics and the arts. Dark times were experienced with the Nazi occupation during World War II, although the city managed to emerge relatively unscathed. During the war and in the economic depression that had preceded it, many Copenhagen neighborhoods had deteriorated into slums. In 1948 an ambitious urban renewal policy called the Finger Plan was adopted. This redeveloped much of the city, creating new housing projects interspaced with green areas of parks and recreational facilities that spread out like fingers from the city center. A rebellion by young people disillusioned with growing materialism, the nuclear arms race and the authoritarian educational system took hold in Copenhagen in the 1960s. Student protests broke out on the university campus and squatters occupied vacant buildings around the city. It came to a head in 1971 when protesters tore down the fence of an abandoned military camp at the east side of Christianshavn and began an occupation of the 41-hectare site, naming this settlement Christiania. In recent decades, major infrastructure projects, enlightened city planning and a wave of grassroots creativity have helped transform Copenhagen from a provincial Scandinavian capital into an enlightened international trendsetter. Not surprisingly, the city never fails to rank highly in quality of life surveys.